Let me call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. I'm Frank Rhino, Mayor Pro Tem. Just a brief announcement, this meeting streamed on the village website. The public can also participate via Zoom. Instructions and overall public participation guidelines are listed on the website and on page 4 of the meeting packet. As with any application, digital service, or software, the opportunity for failure can occur. Therefore, the village is not responsible for the inability to view via live stream. The meeting video and audio is recorded and will be available online after the meeting on the village website. So let me first call the roll. Trustee Benavides.
Here.
Trustee Kiefer.
Present.
Trustee Radovich.
Here.
Trustee Rhino here. Okay. Let's please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so for approval of the agenda, is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Is there a second? Thank you, George.
I'll second it.
Okay, all right. Any discussion from the governing body? No. Okay. Call for the question, roll call vote. Trustee Benavides?
Yes.
Trustee Kiefer?
Yes.
Trustee Radovich?
Yes.
Trustee Rano? Yes, thank you. Okay. So number 5, old business. Discussion and approval of resolution number 2024-07-01. Resolution adopting the FY 2026-2030 Infrastructure Capital Improvement Plan, the ICIP. Administrator Avila, I'm sorry. Will you present the resolution for the IP?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Board of Trustees. This resolution is to accept the ICIP plan. The projects are listed in the page that is attached. The process here is that we have a due date for entering the ICIP projects to DFA as of the 12th. And we thank you for allowing this special meeting on the 10th so that we can have this resolution approved. And so submit the resolution for approval. And if you have any questions, and I can answer them, stand for questions.
So is there a motion to approve resolution number 2024-07-01?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2024-07-01.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Discussion from the governing body. Trustee Benavides.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of time for discussion apparently, right? This is the only thing on our agenda.
Right.
Yeah. When I look at this list, I don't really have a problem with the list, but there's a strategy to some of this, right? We talk about different buckets of money and some buckets fund some things and not other things. There are certain things on this list that maybe the dollars are low enough where the village can pay for it out of our own funds, our general funds, right? So I wonder if, so this would be to you, John Avila, has that sort of thing been factored in? What is it that we're going to send to the state?
What we started with, I'll just run through the process. We had an existing ICIP list that's posted on our website. These are projects that have been worked on over the years, and some may have moved up in rank, went down in rank. We asked staff where they thought the most critical projects were. We went through that review. We went through where they are so far as funding, and how close they are to completion, if they should still be on the ICIP list, or are there other projects to be on the ICIP list. We went through that, and then we asked for public input as to what people thought were the priorities. Now, each of the projects did have consideration of how much funding was needed. We did have to make those estimates. But after the survey to see where the public saw the priorities, that's how we listed them based on that survey. So that's how they're listed as far as priority. The information within those projects is as good as we have at this point.
Okay, but so some projects are more likely to get funded by the state than other projects based upon what the project is all about, like a fund used to improve roads, for example, right? So our number one thing is acquisition, improvement, maintenance of open space. Is that something that the state might actually fund?
They might. And what we're looking for here, not only with acquisition, is around water rights. So that's a phase, a portion of this particular project that we want to get taken care of. In the village, we don't have enough water rights to maintain a good agricultural base. And if that's what we're about, agriculture, we want to make sure that that's covered. So they might get us funding for that.
All right, but there are other things that might be a little bit higher in probability as rather than they might do that, right?
Right.
Strategically, would we give those large dollar, high probability projects a higher priority because of that?
The priority list is entered again as to what was revealed in the survey. They're not markedly changed from before, and as in acquisition isn't something that came up from the bottom. It was in the top projects in any case. But regional projects, obviously where there's funding sources like roads, those, they have all the other funds. Water projects, which, we're not exactly in the water utility business, but those ones would have additional monies to put towards these. As far as prioritization for legislative request, that will come later in the year after we get feedback as to where the programs are. So then we'll ask for a legislative priority list that we apply for capital outlay with.
Oh, okay, so you said something important. We will get the feedback, and say that again. Who gives us, puts together the feedback, and when does that happen again?
The agencies, the legislators will get that information back as to where there are funding sources, what they're willing to support based on regional needs, based on other factors, and then the Board of Trustees will provide a legislative priority list for capital outlay.
Okay.
And we'll provide that to our legislators and submit for those projects.
Okay, no, that's a good answer. Can I ask Maria Rinaldi if she has anything to add to that?
Mayor, trustees, I can basically speak to the projects on the ICIP that are under my purview, which are 4th Street and Chavez Trail. And those have funding sources that the other projects on the ICIP are not eligible for, so they're not really competing with other projects on this list.
Okay, and you're okay with the priority as listed.
Mayor, trustees, yes, as long as these ones that have identified funds and we are already in the process for and already basically in the funding cycles for, as long as they are in the top 4, we're perfectly fine.
Thank you. That's all I have. Go ahead.
Trustee Kiefer?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I had the opportunity, and I want to take this time to thank staff, to thank John for putting together what I like to call field trip of village property for me this week. I got to go to all the properties and took pictures of them because I figured if I'm going to be making decisions on what needs what, I need to understand and see with my own eyes some of those buildings and actually look and see. So thank you, John, for doing that for me. So, I mean, I'm sure some of the questions of Trustee Benavides is because it looks like, you know, just kind of doing some rough estimates, 4th Street came in pretty low out of priority for individuals, but I don't think that we should discount people's opinions of that. I mean, we still need to do 4th Street. I mean, we need to slow it down. We need to still do the skinny of it. But I think there's some priorities that we really need to look at because what we've heard from the community is we've never listened to them, and we gave them a voice in this project and in this process, and they responded with these rankings. And so I'm going to really be looking at it from that point of view, but before I make any decisions on allocations of money or anything, I'm looking forward to hear public comment first.
Trustee Radovich?
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. I agree with what Trustee Kiefer just said. I think that having the public involved in this process, more involved, and throughout the year is important. When these show up on the infrastructure capital improvement plan, it seems we kind of forget about them until the next year when we have to do the next ICIP, other than the ones that are kind of on the top of the list from a funding perspective. And it seems to me that we ought to really try to, from a village perspective, try to dig deeper into each of these projects. As an example, 1, 2, 3, 4 projects, 5 projects, all of the roads showed up on the list. You probably remember at the last meeting, or maybe it was the meeting before. El Pueblo, Rio Grande, Chavez Multi-Use, Osuna and 2nd Street, Ortega Road. And there are people that are in the village that are really concerned about these streets and working on them. The prime example from the resident perspective, or from the village resident perspective, is Ortega Road. There's been so much discussion about the speeds on Ortega Road. And so I think we need to look at these roads in a more village-wide perspective. I mean, when we've got 4th Street, or when we got Chavez Road Trail on this list, it was because we were able to get a lot of money from the state because we have someone that is good at getting money from DOT on projects like that. These others are important, I think, to residents as well, but we haven't really discussed them at all. So over the coming year, I'd like to see us have more public discussion about what this really means in terms of what could end up becoming something that improves the village in a way that is village-centric and not so much NMDOT-centric. And so I see that as being really important over the coming year. And then others, veterans are really important in this country, and they've protected us and saved us from many kind of conflicts around the world. And but there are so many veteran memorials around the city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County. I question how we can make ours different. And so I'd like to hear, or how we can make ours kind of more village-centric, maybe is the best way to put it. So I'd like to hear from our veterans about that. Same with some of the others. So I just wanted to throw that out as a general comment. And like Trustee Kiefer, I want to hear from the public on this as well.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I clarify? I'm half asleep, and I want to thank Danielle, and I don't want any confusion amongst us in case I did. 5's the lowest, 1's the highest. So when I was ranking these, I ranked them backwards. And so when I made my comment about 4th Street, it's like one of the highest. So my apologies to anyone, and I just want to set the record straight that I was confused, and I didn't want to create any additional confusion amongst the board. So my apologies, Gil, and my apologies in reading this report. And thank you, Danielle.
Following up on what Trustee Radovich talked about, when I looked at these and I ranked them and I submitted my material, I looked on the back of the form that had the village goals on it, and I tried then to identify which projects would fit into each of the goals. And so, I'm looking at these in a way where, personally I ranked, health and safety as extremely important. The aesthetics of the village are certainly important as well. Maintaining the open spaces that we have is certainly important as well. So I tried to understand then what the implications are for the selection of these based on the goals that we've set for ourselves. And the goals may have to be, again, updated, but I think that it gives us sort of a kind of a direction on what we need to be thinking about in terms of what's most important for funding in the village, okay? And that also goes back to Trustee Benavides's point as well, that we need to also understand what kind of funding is required in order to be able to complete projects. One of the things that that we've already talked about is that some of these projects already have some funding to them. And what I wonder is if the project is already state funded, whether that can potentially impact the state's ability to refund that project at a rate that we're interested in seeing on our ICIP. I mean, maybe Maria, you'd have some kind of comment on that.
Mayor, trustees, it does matter, the ranking in your ICIP. The state really put an emphasis on infrastructure capital improvement planning about 15 years ago, and many of the funding applications that you see both at the state and federal level, and we don't just have NMDOT money. We have transportation alternative project money, which is directly from the federal government, and ranking does matter. Generally, what they want to see is that it makes the top 5 priority list by the board governing body of the local government applying for funds. 1 is always best, of course. If there's a point system and there's points attributed to the ranking in the local planning, but we also use the master plan. and any other planning documents that are guidance documents of a project and how it fits within a community. So there's a whole number of things that go into rating and ranking when you're seeking funding. At the state level, ICIP is number one. And as the state moves more and more towards less and less pork barrel, if you know what I mean by that term, just pure political capital outlay, and moves more, and we see this steadily, and it's a good thing, in my personal opinion, from a local government perspective. These things matter more and more. When you're in a funding stream, if they see a priority slip, that may cause concern. But it depends on how large the slip is. Is this something the community has just said, we're done with that, it's no longer a priority, moving on? But as long as it's reflective and still shows a commitment towards fulfilling these projects, it's just a matter of maybe points. Does that answer your question?
Sure, okay. I'm just wondering, is there any other discussion from members of the board, from anybody?
Mayor Pro Tem, just in case there's no discussion, in answer to Trustee Benavides' question about projects priority, when the staff reviewed it, they looked at different items, as, where's the other funding, how much will it take, programmatic questions. And one of these on here, because of the way it was worded, I think more than anything else on the survey, did get a high ranking, but there's some issues with it, and that's the levy mitigation. Now, we do have grant funding to continue the study, but the levy is a multi-entity facility. It's not ours. If we go out and fix the levy for Los Ranchos, the rest of the levy still needs fixing, or you don't get it fixed. So we do need to address that at a more regional level. But if we're out to ask money from the capital outlay for levy by itself, it really isn't. It's taking a high rank, and it's not really going to get us any bang for whatever bucks might come toward it. So one of the things is that we're looking at a funding source that would apply here if all the entities were together on it, which is the Water Trust Board for drainage and so forth. That funding won't be available for that project till FY27. So for that reason, the fact that it's regional, the fact that there's really not a criticality as to that failing, it's just not going to happen. I would say that really doesn't need to be in the top priority. However, the community's seeing this and, understanding that, they assumed it was important to bring it up to the ranking that it is, gave us this ranking. So when evaluating this, when we're looking at the final priority list, that project probably wouldn't be at the top.
So I'm glad you mentioned this. So yeah, levy mitigation is more of a partnership with other municipalities, right? I mean, we all have to do it together. I mean, if the levee breaks in Corrales, we'll probably fill it here, right? So are you recommending that we take it off the list?
No, we have a grant funding on this project and need to keep it on the list. I just say it would not be the top priority that would eliminate another project from getting funding. So that was the staff's recommendation. It was to be considerate, and we do need to follow through on finishing the grant funding on this and see if we can obtain more grant funding. But I would not, as far as prioritization, I would not include it in the top 5. That is just overall review of it. It wouldn't fit.
Okay, so I think we should talk about that. I'd like to hear from the other trustees what they think. Yeah.
Were there any other comments from the board before we move on at all?
No.
Well, I just have a question, and this is to you, Trustee Benavides, because do you sit on the water board? So do they talk about it? Because I thought I heard when we first started, there was something with water that you sat on.
I am, so Village of Los Ranchos has a seat on the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Authority as a non-voting member. And no, we don't talk about the levies, we talk about.
You're not on,
yeah.
you're not on the Conservancy District.
Yeah,
right? Got it. I knew it was something with water, I just
No,
didn't know
it's
what.
fair, it's fair to ask. Yeah, but I think we should talk about strategically, what do we do with that? Obviously, it's an important thing, and it sounds like the time frame is 2027 to go after some funding, to do something about that. And it's from what I hear you saying, it's going to be a partnership, a regional partnership. And I don't know if you've been reaching out to other municipalities like Corrales or, but it sounds like that's something we need to start doing. So I kind of like to talk about this a little bit more, because the suggestion is it doesn't need to be in the top 5. So if it's not in the top 5, if we move it out, what do we move in? The very next one is Agri-Nature Center, right? Go ahead, yeah.
I'd like to say something, Mayor Pro Tem. The levy is really important for all of us to be living here, and obviously, and the Corps has been looking at it for years now. I know it's coming in 27, and the previous administration thought it was pretty important for that reason. And so I think that we do need to keep it on this list. It may not be the top 5, but we do need to keep looking at it, and we do have the money for the consultants to look at it, which we're doing. So I think we just play it as it comes and keep it on the list for years to come, because it's going to be important in the future.
And I think that's what John Avila is suggesting, right?
Yeah.
Keep it on the list,
I think
but it
that's
doesn't
right.
have to be on the top 5, right?
Any other comments from anybody? Okay. So at this point, though, we'll have an opportunity to hear from the public. So anyone from the public wishing to speak on the item of business, you will have 2 minutes. And when you come to the microphone, please state your name and your address for the record. So the first, first name I have is Jeff Phillips. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sorry, Mayor Pro Tem. Since we're really just voting on this, and this is about, gauging the public's opinion, 2 minutes may or may not, it's not very much time. And I would request, and Danielle, I don't know if you can answer this question, I would request that if someone wants a little more time, granted there should be limits, they can have it.
Mayor Pro Tem Trustee Ranovich, that's at the Mayor Pro Tem's call. So if he chooses to do it, but if it's going to be a change to the 2-minute rule, then I think we should keep it at either 3 or whatever time limit it is, so that way we can keep track of that and not allow 1 5 minutes and someone else 2, or whatever the case is, and it's equal across the board. So that's the Mayor Pro Tem's discretion.
With the number of folks that have signed up, certainly moving it to 3 is fine.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
3.
and if it takes a little bit longer, that's okay, So, Mr. Phillips.
Hi, Jeff Phillips, 605 Schulte Road, Northwest. Mayor Pro Tem and trustees, the primary reason I'm standing here is to support adoption of this resolution and the submission of the ICIP as submitted. I also wanted to commend and acknowledge the administration. The administrator and his staff did a neat and wonderful thing getting the survey out, and I think that needs to be commended, and I do trust that they will improve the methodology going forward, but to pull it off and analyze 250 or so responses in the short period of time is definitely worth acknowledgement. The other reason is in your resolution, the fourth whereas, I just want to point it out as something that's really important to me. This process contributes to local and regional efforts in project identification and selection in short and long range capital planning efforts. We, as long as I've been here,
have had a coherent and meaningful role in regional planning, and we need to again. And I just wanted to highlight that. Part of being coherent is having coherent thoughts on priorities that can then go to the table, but we also have to be at the table. And the levy was mentioned. Previous administration, previous mayor actually reinvigorated the levy task force as a result of our mitigation planning efforts. And I don't know where that stands right now. I don't know where we stand on any of our regional planning efforts as our current governing body is made up. But that's something I think that I will be in tune to going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Loretta Chavez-Smith.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and trustees. My name is Loretta Chavez-Smith, 536 Chavez Road, Northwest, just down the road. Number one, okay, the ICP is great. I love the survey, but you guys forgot to put something on the ICP plan, got dropped, the community center. That's not even on there. And it was on, according to my calculations here, it ranked 3rd on the list. But it got dropped. And then I guess I just really don't understand the ranking on what they did here, because according to the numbers across here on the survey do not match the priority that the list has been set up as. And that's not what the people were asking for. And I thought this is part of our village and what the people wanted and wanted to see happen, and that's not happening. So maybe I don't understand this process, but I thought the survey was supposed to be for us, the people of the village, telling our government what we really need to have happen and what we see needs to have happen according to the village people in this survey. So I don't understand how this was done according to the numbers, don't jive. Second thing is, this meeting should have been posted on the website, the first page, right on the front page. Look how many people we have out here for an ICP. That's important to us, our village. And then third, our website is one of the most horrendous things to navigate. I'm sorry, it really is. I'm an older person, and I'm not that savvy about computers. I think I can navigate it pretty well. But you get somebody a little bit older that's not used to computers and is trying to navigate this website, it's awful. That's it, thank you so much.
Thank you, Loretta, because I think that's how I got confused too. So thank you for, because it wasn't driving, but I was half asleep. So thank you for pointing that out.
Gordine McKenzie.
Kind of like to echo what Loretta said. We had a meeting, I think it was last year, when we were thinking about ICIP funding. And we actually were asked to put labels on what the residents wanted most of all. And those rankings, I remember, open space was #1, and a community/cultural center came in at #2. I was surprised to see on the rankings that it actually came in at 14, but it just said community center. If we go to our master plan, one of the goals in the master plan is to really point up the historical and cultural uniqueness of our area. And I think having a community/cultural center, a place where we might be able to have speakers come and other things would definitely enhance life in our village. And I would like to see that one moved up. In terms of the proposed road improvements, I know you all got letters from me on the paving of Guadalupe Trail, which took off 2 feet of the shoulder, the dirt shoulder that residents ride their bicycles on, run on, walk on. Students use it to walk home. We also use it with our bicycles. And we have a neighbor that on Saturday or Sunday brings his horse and ponies another horse and goes down there. Right now from Schulte to, and I don't remember the name of the other street. Is it Toscano? Any of you? But anyway, there's no shoulder on the left. It also took off, I think it was, and I spoke to a road expert on this, 1.5 feet on the other side. So there is a lot more asphalt. So as we think about these projects for improving roads, another thing to remember is that oftentimes they get paid by the square yard of asphalt. So they may put more asphalt out. It changed what was a country road kind of into this big asphalt thing, which doesn't keep the character of the village. And also I'm hoping they will, put speed bumps back, but kind of keeping some of these things in mind and the residents in mind as we make these road improvements. Thank you.
Okay. Nancy Nedgeroni?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and trustees. Nancy Nangeroni, 7315 Guadalupe Trail. I want to say, first of all, that I think I agree with everything that Jeff Phillips had to say. I thought he had some pretty good comments there. I think the ICIP is basically good. And I sincerely applaud the survey that was taken. I think it would have been nice if there'd been a return envelope. I didn't manage to get mine back. There was just too much inertia, but I think the fact that the survey was done is wonderful. And you guys deserve, to be commended for that. So thank you. And I appreciate the ordering according to the survey. It seems like a very democratic way to do things. And that's just terrific. I think in the ICIP final that the Old Village Hall and the community center were conflated into a single item. And I don't know if that's intentional or whatever. I certainly support a community center. I think it'd be nice to have some place where we could congregate if we didn't have to go to the Ray Sanchez Community Center. I think that'd be terrific. As to the road projects, I'm disappointed in the paving of Guadalupe Trail, the widening, and really a substantial change to the character of that road for that portion of it that's newly paved. And I just entreat the village to be more meticulous in management of these projects to make sure that they are done in a way that's consistent with the look and feel of our village and not sort of in a cookie cutter way, because of course we're getting people from Albuquerque to come down and do these things, and they're going to do them the way they're used to, and you can't blame them. And if we're not there to tell them to do it differently, then they're just going to go ahead and do it. But we need to be more careful with these things. That's 2 paving projects in a row now that have produced some negative results. And I'm hoping there can be some correction. I know that I don't know if that's on the table or not, but anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy McKee?
Randy McKee, 749 Chavez Road. Honorable Mayor Pro Tem, trustees, thank you for the opportunity to speak. This ICIP process was done last year. It was done again this year with community involvement, and I think that's very, very important. I heard something said, both George and Gilbert referred to us in getting together and understanding these projects better. Sometimes we don't really understand them, how they're going to be rolled out. Some of the things we're doing, just like the roads that were just paved, getting our involvement and understanding what we're looking for and understanding what you're trying to do is going to be very important. I encourage you all to continue to engage us as a group. I know there's been some fear of that in the past, but I think we should be all sitting down and talking in the rooms about these things in different ways. We did it last year very well. I think there was a lot of engagement. People participated, they got up, they really thought it through. But we did that without a lot of input to what these projects really were. And I think we need to understand them a little bit better and take the time to explain them out and explore them with the community. I also want to encourage you all to continue to consider the fact that we really do need to readdress the master plan. I would encourage you all to start thinking about how we do that. There's some things in our ordinances that we probably need to readdress. The agricultural, the commercial agricultural side of this. I know when Gil ran for office, one of the things he stated he wanted to do was address that issue. We have not had the time to get up and do that. And I want to encourage us to revisit some of these things that can drastically change the way we operate in this village with just somebody showing up and saying, I need AC zoning. And then all of a sudden we have a rodeo grounds in our backyard. So we need to be thinking about this. I encourage you all to really start talking with us about this. And I know you're going to get a lot of people showing up. This last couple of months have really been kind of a little bit crazy, but you're going to get a lot of people showing up now as you all go forward. And let's do it in a participatory manner. We're here to help you. Thank you for your time and your service, and we do respect what you're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Linda McKee? Okay. David Montoya?
Thank you, Mayor, trustees. David Montoya, 8831 4th Street Northwest. I just wanted to, I want to remind us that last go-around we kept 4th Street as #1, and we've worked tirelessly to make 4th Street better. And you know, having my neighbor that was killed on 4th Street run over at Ranchitos, and then my aunt that was run over in front of Los Ranchos school, and having a grandson that goes to Los Ranchos. I want to make sure that we don't lose this ranking and give this give this idea that we're fading a little bit and we're thinking about other projects that are equally important in a lot of people's eyes, and forgetting about 4th Street, because there's been a lot of work to, bring in monies from the legislature, from the federal government, all these entities. So there's a lot that has happened, and I just don't want to lose focus on this. And I want to thank you for actually making it #1 last time. I just don't want to lose the momentum we have. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Are there folks online who are interested? Okay. Are there, so this concludes the number of individuals who signed up, but are there others in the audience who'd like to speak to this? Sure, please come to the microphone and state your name and address.
Good evening. My name's Tom Donnellan, and I live at 6668 Edgewood Drive, Northwest. I want to thank you for trying to get this information in. I know the state went and changed the timeline on this so that suddenly this had to be done very quickly without more time that I think was planned to have originally. So I appreciate that you didn't cut out public comment on it and public input on it a lot. I want to say that I would absolutely agree with that the levies are we can lose everything without having the levies there. But I don't think this year that's a priority. So I think it would be really, it's well putting it back to one of the back in the bottom of the list for right now, with the information that we know we need to get this money. This is going to be important, but it's probably going to be in something as we've heard in 27 that it's going to be coming up. It's also a way to be able to tell the state that we're going to be needing money so that when 27 comes around, they're already primed to be able to start working and funding on the levies. The other thing that I want to, open space is really important, but I think when it comes to getting funding from the legislature, they're much more inclined to, when they have a real project in mind, specific pieces of property that this is what wanted to be bought. And that we got a significant chunk of funding last time for open space. And maybe it might be political or opportune in terms of getting it, that we not just have it at the top of the list saying, we want you to give us money that we can use how we choose to, when they really like having a little more control over that and being able to see what's happening. So those would be two things that I think might be able to come down on the list. I live off of Osuna between 2nd and 4th Street. And while things need to be done there, and I am so disappointed that was not a priority during the planning of our village center. That should have been a part and parcel with that. We lost lots of opportunity to be able to expand right of way. That would have been an easy option at that time. That I miss that, but coming back to that, a lot of what I hear is the people on Ortega are really being impacted right now in ways that, for me, I think Ortega would probably be a better help in terms of what's going to happen. It would keep fewer people cutting across the village to.
The speaker's time has expired.
Thank you. That would be a bigger help and would help people that oftentimes get overlooked, where I think we over off of Osuna have a pretty big, we're pretty obvious right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Was there anyone else in the audience who wanted to come and speak to this at all? Anybody? Okay. What I'd like to do, though, is to kind of get back to some further discussion from the trustees. I'd like to give us an opportunity to kind of discuss what you've heard and identify then what you perceive as some of the major projects that we really need to start thinking about. So, Trustee Benavides, you want to start us off?
Sure. I want to talk about community center / cultural center. I think this requires a much larger discussion and participation from the public, because I don't know what that is yet. I mean, on here, we have something called the Old Village Hall Community Center, and obviously that is not what you mean by a community center. I get that. You know, so we have the Alameda, Raymond G. Sanchez Community Center, which is a big community center. I mean, are you talking something that size, or probably not, right? So I need to better understand what the scope of that should be and where maybe that should go. And when it comes to thinking about a cultural center, and you know, I think we're still struggling with what do we do with the Anderson House, right? Does that become a cultural center? I don't know what to do with that just yet. Right? We just haven't even had the bandwidth to talk about those sort of things because we're so preoccupied with other things right now. So yeah, I think this requires a long discussion and planning before we know what that looks like. So what's not on the list are things that Trustee Radnovich brought up. Now, you specifically talked about Ortega, and I think you're talking about Ortega between 4th Street and Rio Grande Boulevard, right? And so we talk a lot about Ortega between 2nd and 4th, and we talk a lot about El Pueblo between 2nd and 4th. But we're not talking enough about those two streets between 4th and Rio Grande Boulevard. And what can we do to slow traffic down? And I think if we're going to do something about that, they both deserve equal priority. I don't want to see us prioritize one over the other because, you know, you make it difficult on one and you just push more traffic on the other. So it's not on this list, but if we're talking about traffic calming measures, what can we do to take care of the people that live along those streets, right? That's all I have.
Trustee Kiefer?
I agree with Trustee Benavides, and I guess the question that I had was, you know, to kind of Trustee Radnovich's point, can we bundle like all the road projects together and move them up and be specific? Like, we have them separated, right? We have the Osuna between 2nd and Rio Grande, we have the Ortega, we have the El Pueblo. Could we make like a number 4, number 2, or whatever number, village road project, so we can look at it from holistic and ask the state for 30 million if that's what they all add up to? Or, I mean, is that probable rather than these little amounts here and there?
You're not, are you asking a question or?
Yeah, I guess it's a question if anyone has the answer to, I don't.
I don't have an answer for you necessarily, but I do have some thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I don't think we've totally, we always look at our village from the perspective of the money that's out there and not necessarily always from the culture of the village. And so things like that Guadalupe Trail repaving happen because, one, road contractors do what they do in terms of how they put down asphalt. And they don't usually ask questions about that, they just do it. And they do get paid by the yard. I don't know how that one was bid, but they do often. I think we need to be more careful about how we deal with the engineering ramifications of projects, because engineers tend to look at projects in a sort of larger scale kind of way. They look at roads and how vehicles work on them. They don't always look at how people use the little bit of path that they have on Guadalupe Trail as that example. So that's why I've often, nothing against engineers,
Nothing against architects.
That's why I've often said that engineers should not be in lead roles in a lot of these projects, because, and I understand the law, but it doesn't always happen. When we did 4th Street, an engineer was not the lead, a landscape architect was. And the projects turn out differently when that's the case, because engineers are taught and do projects differently. And they don't always consider the social aspects of road projects. So we have now a plan that I think we're just about done with, that Parametrics did to study all of the roads in the village. I think it would be worth looking at other aspects of transportation in the village, like trails, like the MRGCD, the acequias and the ditches, and other parts of that picture, and put this all together into a more comprehensive plan. I like the idea of having these roads that are important roads, Ortega and Rio Grande especially, and El Pueblo also especially, and Osuna and Second on here, but it needs to be looked at in a comprehensive way. I don't know that the projects are all one project. That would be a gigantic undertaking, but they should be looked at in the perspective of what is the most important and how do we really want to have that corridor work.
Right. And I completely agree with you, 100%. I guess I'm just trying to figure out, how do we achieve that monetarily? And is it with state funds? You know, because then do we get handicapped with the regulations, right? I don't know these answers. So I guess that's what I'm trying to ask the question is, can you bundle it to say, hey, we need $40 million for our roads, but then we put the plan together over the course of a year, year and a half, you know, if you're given the money for 2-3 years to spend, to put that holistic plan together to expend the money. But my fear is I don't want to, kind of like what we've always done, right? Is, okay, Osuna and Second's way up here at number 4. So let's say we get the $1.5 million. Well, now we're just piecemealing it rather than doing it. So how do we, I don't know, are there answers? How do we do it holistically? Can we?
It's always going to be piecemealed because of the cost.
So then do we just move the roads down lower in priority for now then?
We have it be part of a comprehensive approach. And 4th Street was kind of that. It was that, really. And as you know, I have had my issues with 4th Street. But I've also have my love of 4th Street. And so,
sure.
You know, I think we just need to put it into a village perspective more than we need to put it into the perspective of other governments. Not to say that we shouldn't be accepting money from places like the feds or the state, but we need to do it in a way that helps to contribute to who we are in a better way, I think,
So
in the future.
were you going to say something, Frank?
Well, I was going to say that it appears that Administrator Avila had a comment to make about that.
Oh,
yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem, Trustees, so just, this seemed to be an actual question of whether you can submit it, roads like that. Well, in the agreements, from my experience, you have a road with a termini from here to here, and you're gonna put this kind of work into it. So it's very defined in the agreement. So from that perspective, you're basically gonna take a bunch of roads, put them into a pile, and only be able to describe one at a time. So it's gonna work against us to do that, if we tried that. You could say this road is a phase of a loop or something, but you're still only dealing with one piece of it at a time. So, you know, if you can get a chance at a couple important or your high priority roads, that's your better opportunity or a gamble than saying, okay, we're gonna put them all in a bag and try to get money for them.
Which is why 4th Street was able to be done differently because it was phased, I would assume.
Mayor Pro Tem, Trustee Keeper, that's exactly right. It's listed in a statewide transportation plan with a termini of all phases, from phase 1 through phase 2A through C, but they are funded in those individual phases. So that's a good example.
Okay, okay. Thank you. I was just trying to figure out how we make this fit without not being able to request the money and get the money, because there's gonna come a time we're not gonna have the surpluses in this state that we currently do, so.
Mayor, may I follow up on that really quickly, because that's a very valid point? One of the intents of the comprehensive transportation analysis was to do that. And the priority of the roads that were identified needing addressing based on speed, traffic volume, and condition of the roadway, all of these roads have shown up in the comprehensive transportation analysis as needing addressing. So there's your planning document that you point to that shows these have been prioritized. And you have that additional backup as well.
So this, just to make sure I'm clear too, when we say some of this, and it probably says it in here, but that could also be speed humps, medians to slow down traffic, whatever we need for the mitigation on each of these roads.
Mayor, Trustee Kiefer, an excellent point by Trustee Radnovich that each one should be studied in a context-sensitive design as its own piece, but how it works within the context of the transportation system and the character of the village. So that's the approach.
Okay, okay, thank you. The only other thing that I, to Trustee Benavides's point is we have that Anderson house too, that we have to figure out something to do with it so that it's not a tax burden or financial burden, I should say, on the village. And but the other piece of property that I think could be really cool, and I know we've talked about it, that we're gonna have to invest money in is the Miller's property. And then having the Del Norte open space behind it, I think we can do a lot of cool things with it. So that's another one that we really need to figure out before it gets, it just sits there abandoned.
I think you had a comment.
No, I did have a question, but I don't have it anymore because Village Administrator John Avila and Program Manager Maria Rinaldi answered the question.
Okay, all right. Trustee Radovich, do you have any further comment at all?
I think that one thing I wanted to mention is how we use village voices and how the village works. Often the public and often I don't know what the problems are in the village. If there's a street that's, well, as an example, everybody probably knows about it, but that heaving that went on right in front of Kelly Joe's on 4th Street. That's something that came up and should be fixed, obviously. I'm sure you're already working on it, but I don't know what's going on, and often residents don't know what's going on. So what I'm trying to say is, like a public meeting, I think the village needs to be more descriptive about what we spend our money on and why, if we make a change from a public opinion, why we are doing that. Because often the public doesn't know, and as I said, sometimes I don't know, what is important. And so when we do a vote, as Loretta was talking about and others did, that vote is just part of the picture. The other part of the picture is that people like Keen and John and others, our new planner, have something to say about that too, because they're right in the middle of it from day to day. And so we can't always use a vote as the way we categorize or prioritize projects like this. It has to be that along with what the village thinks from people that are in charge of things like roads and parks and other infrastructure.
I would see, based on what we've talked about, there seems to be, at least some areas of agreement. One of the things, though, that's come out of the discussion tonight is the necessity really to have a more comprehensive view of these projects. And that's not to say that we want to scrap the list. What it says, though, is that we need to be able to do this in a way that is more rigorous and gives us the information that we need, along with input from the public, to ensure that we're doing it right. Okay.
And to ensure that we're reaching our quality of life, our culture, and our history. All of those things need to be part of that decision-making.
Sure.
Oh, when you're done,
Trustee Benavides, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see, two things. So the part on the crosswalk on 4th Street where the concrete's coming up, and Maria, you said you're well aware of that. I assume that's because of the thermal expansion of the concrete caused it to. So this is the difference between an engineer and an architect, I'm sorry. All right, so one other thing. Chavis Road Multi-Use Trail, there was a public meeting scheduled, and I believe that's been postponed. Do you want to comment about that, Maria?
Mayor Pro Tem, Trustee Benavides, thank you for that question. We had a meeting yesterday with the representative out of NMDOT, who is the liaison with the Transportation Alternative Program Committee with the state of New Mexico, through which we are funded. We have Transportation Alternative Project trail-specific money for that. And we have realized through the preliminary engineering process, which was the purpose of this, we did not even apply for construction money. We wanted to know the feasibility of a trail and what potential alternatives could be designed based on existing conditions. It does appear that we will be unable to acquire right-of-way, the entire width of Chavis Road, to accommodate a 10-foot trail throughout. We are in negotiations with 2 property owners for right-of-way acquisition, but that's 2 out of, we were hoping that there would be 7, and 5 of them are just not going to happen. So we are requesting a meeting with this committee, Transportation Alternatives Committee, to get a change in scope to allow for the narrowing of the trail in the areas where it needs to be narrowed in accordance with available right-of-way. In addition to that, we are going to ask for the opportunity to secure additional funding that would allow for roadway improvements to coordinate into the construction project to do things that mitigate traffic congestion and speed. So this would be roadway enhancements along with pedestrian trail that would allow for things potentially, this is all potential at this point, things like sharrows, like bike shared facilities in the travel lanes, the potential for more narrow travel lanes, bulb outs, anything that would help to make the corridor a more comprehensive project for improvement for all users, but we just do not have the 10-foot required width throughout the corridor for a multi-use trail. So we have postponed, we had flyer developed and everything, and I think you were asked about your availability for that. So the hope was to have this meeting to show potential alternatives July 25th. It looks like we're going to be able to meet with the Transportation Alternative Committee the first week of August at the earliest. So that's the hold on that. But it's, you know, it's an opportunity to make additional improvements to that corridor that are not just trail specific. So I think that's a positive as well. But so we're trying to turn we're just trying to turn it into a better opportunity within the constraints of what we're working with in the right of way.
Mayor, may I ask Maria a question? Maria, who is that committee?
The Transportation Alternative Committee, it's a committee that administers the federal funds for trails.
For the DOT?
For the state of New Mexico. It's their liaison is DOT, our District 3 engineer, but it is an actual committee, transportation committee.
So I'd like to request to be part of that meeting.
Certainly.
Let me know when it happens, and if that's okay with the other trustees, I'd love to be a part of that.
Certainly.
Because I thank you for listening. You know, I think those comments, I made some of the comments you just said are now being considered. I know others in the audience did as well, and I'm glad that that's the direction you're going. So I'd like to be a part of that.
I have a question too, and this is just pure curiosity. With the change, could it also potentially, like if we found a better area, could it change locations as well? Or is it strictly for Chavez, period? Or could you use the traffic mitigation part for Chavez, because I know that's one of the biggest concerns, and the trail be somewhere else in the village?
Mayor, Trustee Kiefer, no, it is identified as Chavez Road. And it's identified thus based on all of the planning documentation that identified Chavez Road as the place for a multi-use trail.
So I guess the question I have is, with the change in scope then, is this project one that can still have a high level of support from the village?
Mayor Pro Tem, trustees, that's a valid question. So we don't know that we will be able to secure a change in scope because it is trail funded. So first of all, we need to find out whether or not we can have a change in scope. If we cannot, then the decision needs to be made as to whether or not we want a trail that changes in width through the corridor based on existing conditions. So there's a couple of steps ahead of that, but it is a very feasible project for pedestrian safety, for pedestrian facility and multi-use facility. We just hope to expand the project to be able to address some of the vehicular mitigations.
But those changes, though, would not go into the ICIP document that we submit to the state.
Mayor, trustees, the way that it is scoped now, it is fine to remain that same because it says for improvement to all users.
Trustee Radovich, you had a comment or question?
No, I think I did, but I answered myself. I talk to myself sometimes.
Okay. Were there,
Just one more? Oh.
Attorney has a comment.
oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if this is working, it says
I just had a question as whether or not eminent domain was considered for widening of the right-of-way for those 12 properties.
Mayor Pro Tem, trustees, eminent domain has never been part of the discussion. The decision was made in the previous administration that there would be no takings, We attempted to enter into discussions for identified abandoned easements within the right-of-way, but that was not well received, and the decision was made not to further pursue them.
Trustee Kiefer, do you have a question? Another question?
I did, but it left.
I do have something,
Sure, go ahead,
I'll
yeah.
give you some time to remember it.
Thank you.
I seem to remember under the Alfredo Garcia Community Barn upgrades that I asked if we could add an environmental review, specifically cultural, because of the Chavez family estate that used to be there that never really fully got a study completed. Archaeological, and it didn't end up in this wording on this sheet. So I'd like to amend this if we can, based on that, because I feel that's really important. We don't want to start making improvements before we know what's underground. And it's important for the village, obviously.
Administrator Avila? Is that okay with the village?
Mayor Pro Tem, trustees, all amendments can be included now. And so that one, and if you wanted to change order on this list, that can be done. And then as a changed motion, because the motion's there, but nobody's voted on it yet. So just amending the motion to say we want to include words to that effect in this particular project. We want to change the order. That can be done here live with the resolution.
Let me say something for clarification about that. So Trustee Ranovich, some of those improvements don't require disturbing the ground, right? Like more electrical service, right?
I don't know.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, air conditioning.
you may be right. I just don't know if.
You could go overhead, I suppose, right? So there might be things that you can do without disturbing the ground. I think when we had talked about this in the past, we talked about a piecemeal approach to improving the barn. Some of the things that we could do are not very costly, like more electrical service, like maybe evaporative cooling. Other things would be more costly, like bathrooms and stuff like that, and where now you're digging into the ground, right? So I don't know how you separate those two things, right?
I actually, if you remember, Gil, I actually got a price from an environmental consultant for doing that and finishing that work that was started by, I think, Arnold Sargent's wife. She was part of it anyway. And
I think so, yeah.
It was like $7,000. So it's something that I think the village could easily afford. And why not? And then at least if the electrical line that goes in, if there is one,
Yeah.
can avoid specific areas as needed. So it just seems like it's not a heavily expensive kind of a.
I didn't realize it could be that low cost of an option, okay.
Yeah, that's why I keep
all right.
pushing it. It's
Yeah.
easy, or it seems. And that was just someone that I asked that I work with that knows that kind of work.
Okay.
Well, also, one of the things that I noted at the barn too, if my memory serves me right, is there's no bathrooms there either. So, I mean, if we're going to invest $300,000 in lighting and electricity, it's really, in my opinion, it's having the vision of what are we going to do with it? Because, yeah, now you have lights and you have electricity, but if you don't have bathrooms, I mean, I guess my thing is in picking a specific location, I think I would much rather pick a blank canvas, if we would, almost like Miller's, that is now pretty much blank and we can kind of do what we would want. And put a lot of money, and then you have two anchors of the village. You have a north anchor and you have the agri center at the south anchor. And then you start encouraging pedestrian activities and traffic with the shops on 4th Street. And you're getting people to travel and spend money between the two anchors. Because, I mean, I agree, the barn was great. It was really cool to see, but we charge very little for it. So it's not like we make money. We're talking about dumping 300,000 in just these things, and it has no bathrooms. And yet we have Village Hall, the building we're in right now, that we have more people in, that doesn't have ADA bathrooms, and our staff works in. So, I mean, I think there's some, you know, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at, you know, the $1.8 million on Old Village Hall. Hey, that was cute, and I really liked seeing it, and it's a historic barrack, and I think there can be stuff done to it that's not going to be 1.8 million of, you know, demolishing it and tearing the whole thing down. But I mean, that's a residential center, so we don't want to make it that. In my opinion, I don't think residents that live in that area want an influx of a bunch of traffic coming in for meetings, for activities.
Excuse me, what happened to the 1.3 million that was secured to have that renovated? There was 1.3 million already secured for that.
We still have it. There's more time, but it can actually be moved, from what I understand, to another village property. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I guess I struggle with some of these, which is why I wanted to have the field trip to really see these properties, because I think we're piecemealing again. I think it goes back to what we've always said is we need to reestablish the vision of the village. And by reestablishing the village is, are we agricultural? Yes, then we need water rights. I mean, we don't have those. If we're gonna spend 300,000 on a barn, that's great, but I would much rather spend 2 million on the barn, if that's gonna be our commitment, and make it ADA accessible, make it have bathrooms, make it a place to be. I think we just keep posh-poshing a lot of stuff, and that's where I struggle with some of these amounts.
I don't have a problem with anything you said.
Oh, go on.
That's all.
Mr. Avila, it's tied, that money is tied to that particular place, right? To our old Village Hall.
Mayor Pro Tem, Trustee Radovich, we don't know if we can move it. We're checking to see if that's the case.
Oh.
So that's what
I didn't know that.
Last time, is saying we can take a look, because if that's the will of the board, then if we can do it, we'll come up with an idea that might work.
I see.
But right now, we're on the path of taking care of it at that site.
Yes.
That's the plan. That's what we're moving forward with. We have an architect working on design.
Now, I think the barn is a very popular place, and if it was insulated and had bathrooms, you could use it in the wintertime as well. Music and Corrales has come here and have done 2 events so far, and I think there's another one on the horizon. So, yeah, there's lots of opportunities if we improve the barn, no doubt.
One of the things that I understand, and maybe I need to stand corrected here, is that there was some limitation on the development of the barn as an event center. I mean, there was a need to maintain it and at a certain level. And I don't have the information in front of me, but I seem to recall hearing that. I mean, is that something that you guys have heard?
No.
No? Okay.
Well, I mean, some of that gets back to what Trustee Kiefer was saying, that we don't charge very much. You know, people have their weddings there, and it's pretty inexpensive. If it was a nicer facility, I think it would demand a higher rental fee. Plus, it's just having music events there and, you know, even art shows and things like that. We're doing it for the community, right? They love that, the use of the barn.
And my only hesitation so much on the barn is, you know, we want to be respectful of the neighbors, right? You have residential houses that are adjacent to the park and to the barn. But that's why I think it just, you know, my humble opinion, Miller's Feed is perfect now that it's abandoned because it's not surrounded by residential. You've got all that open space that I think if we're creative, we can really, you know, I don't know, do a pick and grow lavender or pick and grow sunflowers, I don't know, something. And then you can use that barn, you can make that a whole community center. I think there's a lot to do because it really, truly is just tons of acreage of open space and it's a blank canvas and it's got plenty of parking in that area too. That I think we could really do something cool with money for that.
So, Administrator Avila, at this point, then, we need to come up with the 5 top priorities. Is that correct?
The list can be amended, and the top 5 would be the considerations. So without doing the work on all the rest, I would say limit any changes to the top 5.
May I ask one more question? I'm sorry, and I just want to make sure I'm clear because there is, Old Village Hall has additional monies here of 1.8. And kind of to Loretta's question, is this an additional 1.8 to what we already have of the 1.2? Or
This is the Mayor Pro Tem Trustee. This is the budget for the project.
this is the total budget?
Right.
Oh, so we never got the full budget yet?
No, this is the total project dollars. This is the way, this is what I understand here.
This is the budget from the architect?
This is the budget for that project. I don't know if it was the architect put it together. So there is funding already towards this, if you want to build an old village hall in that location. They think it's gonna cost
1.8.
1.8.
Okay. And if we got money last year for Old Village Hall, that's,
Old Village Hall does have a budget for architectural work, construction, does not have the 1.8.
got it.
And it does
Okay.
need to be spent by a certain date, but that date isn't as bad as it was originally thought.
Okay, thank you.
So let me ask then, so is there any thought to reallocation of the top 5 priorities?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind moving the Alfredo Garcia Community Barn up higher. I'd be in favor of doing that. And include an archaeological survey.
Trustee Kiefer?
I would support Trustee Benavides of moving that up. I'd also wouldn't mind moving up this location, to renovations, because I mean, staff is here 40+ hours a week. I think they need that.
And Mayor Pro Tem, I was going to make the same suggestion. This is our home as a village, this building in effect. And so moving that up the list, I think I would support as well.
Okay. So then we have 4th Street, and folks are then still supportive of the acquisition and protection of the open space? Okay. Chavez Road?
I think, having heard where Maria's heading with this, I think we should keep it high on the list so that it's potentially funded,
Okay.
and at least for one more year, and see where we go. with it.
And I wouldn't mind postponing it for a little bit because I think we still have some PR to get through with the neighborhoods that abut Chavez Road. You know, I've been to a lot of their HOAs, on both sides, and they're not happy, and they're the ones that are gonna be the most impacted. So I think there's higher priorities, especially while we figure this out.
So, I mean, when I look at the trail, it's not just for those people that live on Chavez. You know, I think all roads need to be walkable, and Chavez is not a very walkable road. And I think if something was to come up where we need to revisit what we're doing with Chavez, there's another opportunity to do that. But to take it off at this point, I think would be premature. So I favor keeping it in the top 5.
Okay.
And I would too. One thing that I like that the sound barriers, I don't know that I'd call it that, because it could be any number of things, but the sound from Paseo really affects the village in a negative way, and it affects most of the village, and anything we can do to help that over time, I think is a really positive thing. So I don't think it should be in the top 5. I like it where it is, actually. So, but it shouldn't go away.
Well, and I think that could potentially move up a little bit. I'm not saying top 5, maybe 6, and only because we had State Representative Day here supporting it. So I think we need to stand behind her and let her know that we want it to.
If we ever improve the Del Norte open space, along with the old Miller's Feed project, facility, and other parts of that whole kind of village space, dealing as much as we can with that road noise would be a very positive thing for that as open space. Having walked it many times.
And I agree with Trustee Benavides and Trustee right now on the need for trails, and I agree every road should be walkable. But I also, if we had a comprehensive approach saying, hey, this trail was gonna get you from 4th Street to the Agri-Nature Center, I think it would make more sense. But the fact that it's a quote, and I've heard it multiple times, and I'll just use it, trail to nowhere, to me, it's not a good use of money. And especially when even though it's a trail, and other individuals will use it, I think we need to soften our approach and work with people and not work against people, and start forcing our own stuff on them. And right now, they are saying there's been too much in this area. Just kind of leave us alone right now. And instead, we just keep, inserting our own will on them. And I don't think now's the time. I think we can back off. It's not something that is gonna be off forever, but I think the dust needs to settle a little bit for that area of the village. And so I understand and I appreciate it, but I think consideration needs to be done to the people whose backyards are gonna be adjoining this trail.
I would like to make a recommendation.
Okay.
I think we ought to move levy mitigation, especially hearing what Mr. Avila said, move levy mitigation down to maybe 7th or 8th or 10th or something in that area, and move Village Hall renovation up, maybe to take its place as 3rd. I do think that, and I understand what Commissioner Kiefer's saying, Commissioner. Good, George. Trustee, I don't know, maybe.
You had a moment.
I had a moment, yeah, I guess. I do think it should stay up high on the list because there's some improvements could be made to help those residents as well. There could be things that could be done as part of that. So I'd like to still explore taking that a little further myself. So that's my only real suggestion to us, is maybe move down levy mitigation and move up village hall renovation.
As well as the barn.
What about the barn though? Yeah.
I don't mind having, I don't know if the barn should be in the top 5. I agree with Gil that the barn is a destination, and that if we can improve it, it'll just improve how much we can use it and get people to use it, and with some creature comforts and some environmental controls, HVAC being one of them, heat being another. You know, I see it being an important improvement that we should still keep high on the list. So those are mine. I do like Osuna and Second Street seems to me to be a pretty important street now with everything that's happening and where we are at this point in time. So that I would advocate for keeping it pretty high on this list because it has the potential to really be an issue, more an issue than it is now.
Well, and I'll challenge, and only because of everything that's transpired within the last 2 or 3, well, probably last month, I guess, since last board meeting. Vineyard is nowhere on here. And now we're talking, you know, Bernalillo County putting a large apartment complex right at that corner. You know, Osuna and Second, as I look at that, I mean, that's going to be in conjunction with Bernalillo County. So it's.
Well, maybe that can be part of the same project because I think they're intertwined.
That whole area.
So perhaps, just throwing it out there, perhaps, and we're screwing around with this to a point that I'm a little worried, but perhaps adding Vineyard Road should also be part of that study would make some sense because it's all really part of that whole kind of vicinity. So maybe we just add that, like I was suggesting, adding the archaeological review to the barn to the Osuna Road project.
Mayor Pro Tem, Trustee Kiefer, Trustee Radnovich, just to give you an idea of what's happening with the next steps on the transportation analysis, one of the things we just asked for in a meeting yesterday was for further analysis of local streets and the impacts of pending development and cut-through traffic. And on that list is Mullen, Vineyard, Willow, Pariso, and Sandia View. So that's in the works. That doesn't need to be on the ICIP until you have a project identified, but I just wanted to give you that information.
So so again, if we take a look at our kind of combined list here, you know, 4th Street, certainly acquisition protection of open space. Chavez, still on the list. Sound barriers. And then we're moving up the Village Hall. We're moving up the, improvements to the barn. Okay. And and then we're also going to move down the levy mitigation. Does that sound like we're on track?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how about, I'd like to make a suggestion prior to the motion.
Sure.
How about if we order these acquisition of open space, 4th Street, Village Hall as 3, Osuna / the area as 4, Chavez Road as 5, Alfredo Garcia Community Barn as 6, the Agri-Nature Center becomes 8, the sound barriers stay at 7, the new 8 is Agri-Nature Center. Then El Pueblo Road, Recreation Senior Facilities, Rio Grande Boulevard, and all the rest as they are now ordered.
Okay.
Just a
So
suggestion.
I can agree with what you said, but with the order of putting Village Hall renovation up higher, and then moving up the Alfredo Garcia Community Barn. However, $300,000 is not nearly enough, right?
Right.
So we need to increase that amount to a lot more, so can we, at least it'll get on the radar. And
For
probably,
things like
probably a
restrooms.
couple million, right?
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah. Where did the 300,000 come from, if I might ask, Mr. Avila?
Mayor Pro Tem, trustees, what I remember is that it was already there. I think it was probably for a phase, like the study.
Yeah, and it's basically me poking, at the administration to get it on the list. And so, yeah, it started out small, as I was able to get on the list by suggesting that we could do small things up, things like electrical service at a lower cost, right? But I have now changed my view of this, and I think we need to go at it in a more comprehensive way and do the archaeological survey and do it right. And if we insulate it, we have music in there, then the noise problem goes away for the neighbors too, so, yeah.
You keep advocating for it.
Yeah.
Before we make a motion and it turns into a vote, I just want to ask one more time, I guess more of a plea. You guys won't budge at all on Chavez. It has to stay top 5. There's nothing to budge. Frank hasn't really said his position on it, but I mean, I don't want to end up in a 2-2 here all night. I don't want to waste people's time, so I'm just going to flat out ask, is there anything that can be done to move that out of the top 5?
My opinion is that it's premature at this point. I think we need to let Maria come back to us and tell us what can be done. What I have heard from some people that live in the Caballero neighborhoods is, okay, I can take a trail if you make the road safe. So let's give Maria an opportunity to come back with some options about how those two things go together. But I think if we take it off now and we lose that momentum, and it could never happen, but we could take it off later if nothing comes to fruition.
Well, and I guess my concern is I've always heard, once you ask for it, you can't take it off, right? So I don't want to be committed to the money and then it not work out the way that.
May I?
Yes, please.
Mayor Pro Tem, trustee, you are committed to the existing funds by virtue of entering into a grant agreement. So you either have to give the funding back and pay back any expenditure that has been made, but that is precisely why we secured only preliminary engineering and design money. We did not want to commit to a construction project that may or may not yet be known to be feasible.
So just to make sure, so this $2 million isn't what we're going to, this is the total project. This is not what we're going to ask for completely. We're just going to ask for whatever portion the new design part is going to be.
Mayor Pro Tem, Trustee Kiefer, just a quick clarification on what goes into the ICIP. it can identify funding in place, but what you're looking at now is future years. This is specifically for funds to be requested, and it will, when it is entered into the ICIP database, we will have to identify potential funding sources. Is it state? Is it federal? Is it general fund? Is it severance tax bond? Whatever, there's an innumerable listing of potential funding sources. The $2 million that's identified in these out years is specifically for construction funds. We are currently funded everything we need to get to a construction project.
Okay, okay.
I would like to add one other thing. As you know, the way that the rest of 4th Street is being designed, I'm not a particular fan of, and I plan to still talk to Maria's team about that when it gets to that point. I was voting it much lower last year than it is even this year. Gil would probably remember that. So I think we do need to improve that road. I just have questions about what that means. Yeah. And so the same with Chavez Road. I could see, I mean, the reason I want to go to that meeting is I want to see if it could include things that would help to ease residents' questions and concerns about it beyond just a trail. Now that we're talking about potentially improving that road in ways that would make it better, slow it down, make it less noisy, also include pedestrians and maybe landscaping that would contribute to it as a place, as a place making.
See, and I agree with all of those things because I think that's what people wanted, right? And I think that's what the public said, and this was the previous administration's answer, was the trail. And so it's kind of like, how do we get that without necessarily having to have a standout trail per se? So I asked the question, I know my answer, and so it is what it is. But thank you.
But Mayor, Trustee Kiefer, just one more point of clarification. There has never been a project defined. The entire effort has been to get to a point where we can propose different design alternatives. So we're still in that process, and this is what's given us the opportunity to say, does it need to be more than just based on the limitations we're seeing, is it an opportunity to ask for additional improvements that may be outside this funding source, but they may potentially be able to help us leverage all of that? And these funding sources, they don't have strict regulations. I mean, you often hear the comments that NMDOT only designs a certain way. Phase 1 of 4th Street is an NMDOT project. Approved, funded, signed off on. That opportunity to do the things that we're having in conversation tonight absolutely exists within the potential funding sources we have now for Chavez Trail.
Okay, thank you.
I think one of the issues that I've also heard in talking with folks along Chavez Road is that if we're so far along in terms of the design and they have not had an opportunity to even say yay or nay in terms of the scope of the trail itself, then that's what they're concerned about.
And Mayor, Trustees, I can understand that concern. The only design alternatives that have ever even been used were in discussions for the potential acquisition of existing easements. Those were not project designs. This entire process was to get an understanding of what is acceptable. We don't have that yet. We're going to make this additional effort to try to add additional design elements to come up with several alternatives that we haven't even thought of to this point. But there has never been a design other than a termini and a description of use proposed. That this project has not moved beyond that at all. So what were the pictures I saw? Exactly what I said. The pictures that you saw, they were used, and then they were spread publicly. Those pictures were used specifically to discuss with property owners the potential to acquire easements on their property adjacent to widen the right-of-way. That was, and if they were misrepresented as anything other than that, that was not a representation by the village. That was a misrepresentation by people who distributed those for purposes other than that conversation. They were only for discussion with the homeowners association and the individual property owners as to why we would be wanting to acquire
Weren't they
those.
online, though? I thought they were on the project on the village website.
Only because they were released. Beyond that. And the explanation was that this is if we can acquire additional right-of-way. But we haven't taken anything to the public yet. That's the.
I know there's been no public meeting, which I think has been the consternation of the public, right? Is there's the village website, there's a project, it talks about Chavez multi-use, it says, look at our designs, look at our drawings. It's on there, I know, because
Right.
other people had seen it and they said they got it offline, and I'm like, I hadn't even seen them yet. So I went to the village website to find them myself. And so, you know, we keep hearing, and, you know, at all of these meetings, is, hey, you know, this is going on, and I'm kind of in panic mode of, how come I don't know, and why aren't we having public meetings, and we're this far behind? And so I appreciate you explaining the process to me, because I also hear we're in planning stages, but I'm like, but it's already online, So
if you look at the project website, it clearly shows that it is a preliminary engineering design phase.
Sure.
Okay?
Yep.
There are no preferred alternatives.
Right.
We also have, just to pipe in, we also have the opportunity, if it stays a trail only, to say no.
Yeah.
You could move it someplace else because you only paid for, the money is only to study that, so that if the right-of-way doesn't work, then it's a possibility we find a different road where the right-of-way can be acquired to put it on, and it's not on.
Well, that's what I asked.
I'm
and
thinking
they said no.
Edgewood. I'm thinking we put it on Edgewood.
Well, I was gonna say Guadalupe Trail, they got all kinds of pavement now.
Well, actually Guadalupe, what was brought up about that widening, it wasn't really planned to be a widening, is really valid. I mean, it's probably the most historic road in the village, because it was an old cattle trail and it turned into a road, and it's got a lot of character, and we need to protect that.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I walked it the other day. You know, once the construction crew was gone, I walked it, and you're right. I mean, that's not what it's supposed to be.
All right.
Mayor Pro Tem, Trustee Radnovich, you know, assurances were given that the profile of the road would not change. They were given, and if it changed, it was an in construction oversight issue. And so
who, okay, so thank you for saying that, because that's just gonna bring another question. Who is our oversight?
So that, I do not do construction oversight on paving and crack seal. That is in the maintenance department.
Thank you.
Okay, so other comments from anybody? Okay.
Do we have our list then? Do we?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we have, let's see, let me get to it again. So it's acquisition, 4th Street, Village Hall, Osuna Road, Chavez, and then the barn.
Wait, which is, sorry. Sona at 7?
I think you said it right.
Yeah.
You said it right.
Yeah.
You said it the way we
Yeah.
talked about.
But go ahead and repeat it, yeah.
And then we had, sound barriers, the Agri Center,
Right?
El Pueblo, and then the
Everything stays the same from
fill
that
in,
point.
yeah.
And we add an environmental archaeological study to the,
To be attached to the barn.
And $2 million.
and $2 million.
Okay.
An additional or total?
Well,
Since we're throwing money around so
Why not?
crazily,
Okay.
like,
it's important to get it on the list, so it'll eventually we'll look at it and get it done, right?
So now let me, okay. The floor is closed for comments.
Good.
Finally, okay. So let's go back to the resolution. Resolution adopting the FY 2026 through 2030 Infrastructure Capital Improvement Plan, ICIP. Do I have let's see.
We have a motion.
We have a motion and a second. At this point, you wanted to amend it to accept this order that you just read off. And then
and the addition of the environmental study and $2 million. And if we want, just to get it in there and on the record, adding Vineyard to the Osuna and Second. Well, I know what you said. I'm just saying it's in that vicinity. The others sort of are, but the other roads you're talking about, but
You can say for purposes of connectivity, adjacent roadways?
something like that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll go for it.
Do we need to formalize all of that, Danielle? Would you do that for us, please?
say that twice, right?
Thank you.
Trustee Ranovich, if you would, we need the amended motion, and I'm guessing that you're going to amend your motion.
You want to do it?
Well, you have the list. Would you mind reading it off again?
Sure. Let's see the list.
Going forward, it'd be nice to have this as a Word document that you're showing up there on the screen so we could see it. And then you could actually edit it as you do this and put it in order, and then we could all look at it in order as it's been changed. Would be helpful and an easy thing to do with current technology.
Resident Donnellan, could you bring that up next April?
I hope that we do this before next.
Okay. So again, we have the land acquisition, 4th Street project, Village Hall, Osuna Road, Chavez multipurpose, Alfredo Garcia Barn with $2 million and the amendment to include the environmental impact study, okay? The sound barriers, the Agri Center, and then El Pueblo.
And everything else stays as it was.
Everything else stays as is.
Okay,
On the list, okay?
Mayor Pro Tem, trustees, we removed levy mitigation, but you didn't indicate where you wanted to insert that. Did you want to insert that ahead of El Pueblo Road, and then the rest followed?
It becomes number 9.
Right.
It's basically changing places with Village Hall renovations.
Noted, thank you.
Okay. So, so then do I have a motion to approve? Oh, that's already in there, okay. Let me then do the roll call. Trustee Benavides?
Yes.
Trustee Kiefer?
Mayor Pro Tem, we need to have a second of that amended motion.
Do we? Okay.
I'll-
So I'll make a motion to approve the amended list.
Okay,
Yeah. You want a second?
I'll second it.
okay. Okay, let me then do any further discussion for anybody? Okay. Roll call, trustee Benavides?
Yes.
Trustee Kiefer?
Yes.
Trustee Radnovich?
Yes.
Trustee Rano, yes. Okay. Motion carries.
Do we do that correctly, Attorney Bill Chappell? Or do we have to vote on the original motion with the amendment?
Yeah, this doesn't work. You amended the motion, and that's what you voted on. Now you need to vote on the original motion as amended.
Okay. That's a new motion. Okay, okay.
You've got an amendment, you've got a motion. You have a motion and a second on the original motion that's been amended. So now you just need to vote on the original motion.
Just call for a roll call vote.
I'll call the roll call.
Yeah.
Trustee Benavides?
Yes.
Trustee Kiefer?
Yes.
Trustee Radnovich?
Yes.
Trustee Rano, yes. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Yes. Time.
Do we need to make a motion to adjourn?
I want to amend that motion.
Oh. Time is 8:05.
Thank you.